Hello and welcome to Overview Overwatch. This is the channel where I get to sit down with members of the Overwatch community and pick their brains on some questions that I have. So, we've interviewed players, we've interviewed managers, and today we're joined by a new assistant coach for New York Excelsior. So, Amir, before we get started with anything else, New York Excelsior, I just want to know, how did you get into the Overwatch scene and how did you get into coaching?
Yeah, so the brief summary was I initially started out as a player, and so I wanted to improve my skill sets as a player. And then I had a guest coaching session with a German coach going by the name of Duke, and I liked it a real lot. So I started to spectate him in his work, and I found my passion kind of with the coaching, as I have a history in general, like helping people in my daily life, like at school, kind of just going around helping people in the class when I finish my own tasks because the teacher found it very useful. And I also worked at a school for quite some time, like half a year. And so yeah, I kind of found my passion in the coaching and like looking at game strategy and see how I can get the most out of people both in and out of the game. And that's how I kind of found my way into the coaching. And as for how I like entered the tier two scene. Well, um, first like I coached in the open division with a German team called Kindergarten, and then we kind of like built a connection with Yab. I knew someone who was on there, the general manager Yasimba, who previously was on with an org called Roar that I had worked with previously. So I kind of established like ground again since at the time we were warming up with them. Um, I shot him a message, gave him some walk samples. He passed it on to the team. They liked what they saw and they gave me a shot. And that's how I kind of burst into tier two. And ever since then, I've been skyrocketing and kind of, I would say that was the moment that really kickstarted my career together with the UA pickup.
Mm. Yeah, I think the Uprising Academy one is definitely an interesting one because um, uh, academy teams, we don't really see them all that much anymore, and so it's probably quite a unique experience to work with an academy team. So, what was that like in comparison to say some of the other projects that you've done in tier two?
Well, technically, you could like ask a lot more from players since they're contracted, they're getting some funded. The level of discipline, generally speaking, is way higher because it's kind of tier two's for most part community driven because we don't have orgs, we don't have academy teams, especially like looking at regions as EU. So it was kind of a big change for me because people were on time and especially given that everybody was playing remotely for the most part of the year. The Koreans had to and the Australian players had to wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. at times,
Wow.
or like most of the times actually, and they still did it. Nobody really complained. Everybody gave it their all every time. They played under the worst circumstances possible, 200 ping from most of the games. So it was like really refreshing to see the side of Overwatch and what it could have been technically if it got the proper support in the scene.
Hmm.
Because when you coach in EU or in an A where it's more player driven and people come late, you can't really blame them, you know. Yeah, sure, you can try to hold them accountable and see where it comes from, but people walk a job, people have to pay the bills. You can't really force people to do things. You kind of have to rely on everybody's individual dedication and kind of surround yourself with people that have the same amount of passion as you. So it kind of works differently. It's not top down anymore. Everybody's like um, level headed.
Yeah.
So it's definitely been a very unique experience to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I know from just our past conversations that you were in university yourself for a lot of your time coaching in tier two. So, how was that experience in terms of finding that balance and finding that motivation to continue with this?
Well, to a lot of people ask me about that actually, and to that I honestly have to say it's not possible to fully balance it out. You have to make sacrifices somewhere. And in this case, my social life, for example, took a lot of hits, and
Mm.
even in university, I made less progress than I technically could have made if I fully focused on it. So for me, the sacrifice was worth it because my end goal is to work in esports anyway, and I felt like I was able to get my foot in the door with the opportunities that I have. So it's really hard to pass on them. I will still stay enrolled in university, and at some point I will finish my degree, come
Yeah.
back to it. And I would recommend everybody else who's pursuing a career in this industry to do the same. Like I would never encourage someone to like say quit high school or quit university to go pursue esports or in this particular case Overwatch. But yeah, for me the social life took a lot of hits because during the day, like during the early morning in the day, I was doing university, and then during the evening and late nights, I would coach for UA. It was only possible to do because the scrims in UA were happening in and eight times while I was still in U. Otherwise,
Okay.
I think there would have been a lot of overlaps.
Yeah.
So yeah, and obviously COVID helped me a shit ton because I was able to just watch the lectures back since they happen online and like pre-recorded
Okay.
versus having to physically drive to the university, which already cost me a lot of time. Like my drive is almost an hour to the
Wow.
uni.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Look, I mean, I don't think just speaking to a lot of people here, there is an element of luck required to get to where you are, and that's not to
absolutely,
dismiss
yeah,
the skill and the talent in any regard, but you know, it, there is a bit of luck, and that's kind of just a word of warning to people who are, looking from the outside in. Um, it takes more than just talent, I guess. But look, what's more important here is your foot is very much firmly in the door here now. Assistant coach job for NYXL. I mean, it must have been just a fantastic, you know, announcement to hear that you've been selected. What was that experience like?
oh yeah. I mean, I it's kind of interesting because I talked to a lot of colleagues in the scene who have been there way longer than me, and they told me about their experience. And to me, I was really impressed by their mental fortitude and that they haven't quit or haven't come out yet with the shit that they faced in the scene. So for me, I was at a point where I would say was the lowest, especially because you hear all these rumors about what's going on behind the scenes, decisions people make. At the same time, like people spreading the quote unquote propaganda that Owl will be more Western because the budget decreases suddenly and people don't want to pay for visas anymore. And it actually turned out to be almost the opposite. There weren't a lot of teams who switched up to Western, if
Mm,
any at all. Like, yeah, sure, New York did, but looking at other teams like Valiant as well joining the West, but at the same time, like uh, Shock went away from the mixed roster going Korean, for example.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
um,
There's definitely some instances of both kind of directions. I don't think it's definitely
yeah,
one or the other. Yeah.
yeah. We saw a good amount of Western signings. I will say that, but the amount of signings, Western signings and Western switch ups didn't really live up to the expectations that got rumored.
Hmm.
So it was kind of underwhelming, and like it was really late into the season when I like reached out to teams and nobody wanted to trial Western people. So I was kind of like on the fence of what I'm gonna do for the next season. And then I heard about NYXL. I decided to shoot my shot, and it worked in hindsight, right? But for me, this was kind of the all or nothing kind of deal.
Okay.
For me, it was like it was either that team or probably take a break, focus on university, and then try again, maybe in a different game.
Mm.
Like I had all sorts of considerations. I really love the game. So even though like I had the opportunity to switch to another game like Valorant, which a lot of people have recommended me, I kind of want to have a career in this game if possible, and want to like help grow the scene in Overwatch. Really unpopular opinion. I know that like people everywhere say Overwatch is doomed, or especially ever since COVID hit and now we're in the esports winter. Um, so I kind of obviously I can't predict the future.
Yeah.
I don't know where it will go, but what I do know is that I'm really passionate about the game, and therefore I want to work my ass off to make sure that I show my ability in this season, and I show that I can help my team.
Yeah, I mean it's entirely honorable, and look, I'm all for progression of the scene. You know, I love Overwatch as well. Couldn't imagine myself with a different game anytime soon. You know, so um, when even when it comes to kind of EU talent, which is sort of, you know, it will be my focus. You know, my interest. Seeing the likes of Shockwave and Psycho get picked up for an Overwatch League team. Again, in some instances it's fantastic. You know, it's absolutely, you know, it's just great. So, as a European yourself, did you have much of a hand in the Shockwave and Psycho signings?
I mean, I'm I was an absolute uh fan. Well, yeah, I'll just use fan. What it's fine. So for me, I haven't worked with them before. You know, I talked to people who did, and I got an impression from those people around them who worked with them, and obviously I scrimmed against them a bunch, and
Yeah.
I liked what I saw. I knew I wanted to
Mm.
trial them for 100%. We like speaking of trials, we trialed a lot of people in a really short amount of time. It's like 60 people in under a week, which is pretty hefty amount, all things considered. And we had to fit in triple blocks in at some day, like during some days, just to make it happen
Wow.
from a organizational perspective. So for me, seeing that they kind of held up to the expectations and they prevailed made me really happy and really like hopeful. Working with them so far has been a good time. They're really proactive players. They're always like tackle problems head on. They're not shy of like sharing their opinion whenever asked, and it's really something. It's a decent character trait and quality that I've been looking um in for players like a really long time. You don't come across players that often who are like that, and I really appreciate that about them.
And tell me a little bit then about Kellen. You know, um, obviously, to spoil the surprise here, you've gone for a mixed roster on the NYXL. And this obviously makes sense when you look at yourself and Changun in that coaching department. So, um, why Kellen? And then primarily, why only Kellen? I think would probably be, you know, the more interesting question here.
Yeah, so we considered a few variations of the roster: two tanks, two DPS, three DPS, like two supports, three supports, and like all kinds of rosters we could have went for. We kind of like put down a list with all possible scenarios, and we found that it was a really safe option to go for, at least from a mechanical perspective, to pick up Callan as a solo tank. You can see that a lot of teams, especially like those who cut down budget, opted for that decision as
Mm.
well. So for us, seeing how Callan mechanically performed across the board gave us a really good feeling of just going with him. Of course, people can point out the previous season where there were a few problems on previous NYXL roster, you know, and people can rightfully question if we can integrate Callan into a mixed roster or if there will be communicational issues. We're willing to take the risk, certainly, with what we saw in the trials. I feel like we were definitely, we could afford to take the risk. And I think we have some time to work it out and see where it gets us. People have been saying the same about Florida picking up someone
Mm.
into the roster, and they, even though Florida started out with having a two tank lineup with Adam in the mix, they opted to play someone for the entire season, and it kind of worked out for them. So um, I feel like we can do that as well.
Okay. And look, I think one of the most, well, in my opinion, one of the most interesting signings here is also on the DPS line. It's Fitz. It's such a fantastic name, you know. How did that come to be? Why did you choose Fitz here as kind of your third DPS?
Well, the thing with Fitz is that his English in the trials, from what he's shown, was really fine, like really
Okay.
good compared to some other trials that we had. We trialed a lot of players, a lot of good players as well, who ended up going to a different owl team that we didn't make an offer. But with Fitz, he brings a lot of experience. He with the English that he has and the experience that he has, he can certainly help some of the other players with the veterancy that he brings, game knowledge. He
Yeah.
can also help the Koreans that we have on the roster too. So yeah, and obviously Changun had previous experience with him playing on Seoul, so it was kind of a safe bet. You know, there's certain like risks, like certain areas where you have to take risks with this kind of project, especially because we were so late in the market. Like, um, we had a quote unquote limited pool to choose from, but I'm gonna be honest, even with this limited pool compared to the beginning of the off season, there's still lots of talent who haven't been signed on an
Mm,
Overwatch League team. You can see it from just from
yeah,
looking at Korean contenders. You know, there are players like Iris, Muse, Finale. They're all not in Owl, and they're still
yeah.
like decent players. You know, so for us. Um, we had some important like internal criteria aside from just the raw gameplay that I can't disclose here, but there's definitely been a solid and long, thorough thought process
Yeah.
when it came to selecting the roster and the players that we wanted to have. And for this one, Fitz was just a really good safe option. You know,
Mm.
really easy to integrate in my opinion. Really solid player mechanically, brings a lot of veteran experience in different metas that you can just use. You know.
So yeah, you spoke that Fitz is like you said a safe option. When we were discussing Kellen there, you mentioned that there may be some issues. Well, maybe not. There might be some issues, but there's some question marks there around integration with Western players.
Yeah.
So Fitz is your safe option. Do you feel like Kellen is kind of your riskier option?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, looking at it from an outside perspective, both technically never played on a mixed roster, but fits with his experience and with the ability of speaking English that he has shown in the trials and even the scrims that we have right now. Definitely, and his past with Changun definitely on paper is a safer option than
Mm,
say Callan, which who neither I or Changun have previously worked with before.
mm,
Nugget did, so he can help us on that end for sure when it comes to how we integrate him. So I'll be looking for his help on that end. Other than that, yeah, in certain areas you are gonna take risks and it's definitely worth taking them. Whereas in
yeah.
of course you can't build a team where every position is technically a risk. That's just kind of possibly too risky and overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
It just can completely go down the drain and you never know.
Yeah, it's finding a balance, I think, between these safe options and these risky options because yes, you might be taking a risk, but the reward is there, and that's what it's all about, you know.
Yeah, I would
Um,
call it calculated risks
yeah,
that we
yeah.
were taking, yes.
Is there anyone else that comes to mind when you hear calculated risks?
Well, no, I would say for the other players on the team, yeah, I mean, some people would call might call creative a calculated risk as well in terms of like integrating him into the roster. But once again, Changon has experience working with both creative and fits, right? Um, a lot of casual viewers might even call a whole roster a risk, you know, and say like, yeah, you're just gonna end up bottom and stuff. For me personally, it's as simple as even if you think that the chances that we do something with the roster and we do well is 5%, I don't care about that. I'm gonna fight for the 5% in your mind. For me, the percentage is higher. It's really
Mm,
hard to ballpark it, but even if it was 5%, for me, it's worth fighting for.
yeah,
Otherwise, we wouldn't have built the roster, you know?
yeah. I mean, absolutely. You have to go in with a kind of a fighting mentality for sure, for sure. So we've spoken a lot here about kind of these players, and in terms of experience for you as a coach, you've had ample experience, but also ample experience with working with people from many different kind of cultures. You've worked with Koreans before, you've worked with NA players, you've worked with European players. What is when you approach coaching with these players? Do you approach it differently depending on kind of what the background is of these players, or how does it work?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You have to. You have no other choice. Like the cultural differences between NA, EU, and I even work with Arab players from Saudi Arabia. I even worked in Australia
Yeah.
for some time. So every region kind of has its own intricacies and caveats for how they handle things. You're just looking at like the discipline level for scheduling and scrims. I would say, for instance, EU looks completely different to NA. I feel like in EU we have a higher, generally higher level of discipline, less like casual, less of this. casual, laid back gaming mentality and like less probability for people to troll your scrims versus NA. Like NA, you have that usual tier two schedule. Even it kind of shows in the schedule for me as well. People scrim from 6 to 8, 8 to 10. They fully like just want to play. They want a game.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to like putting in the work outside of the games, like um, just taking that 1 hour break between two blocks as EU does it, or even Owl does it, can help so much. You can like recharge yourself with energy. You can go for food, you can go for a drink, a coffee, or whatever. You can use the time to just, calm down a bit, to refocus on the next block. You can even chuck in a VOD review. There's so many, like, the options are endless,
Mm.
nearly. Depends on like what you want to do with it, with that time. But having that time between the two scrims is better than not having it. You see what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of those moments and the way people book scrims. Like for example, in A, when I started to coach UA, didn't have weekly scrims. In regions like EU, what people do is they book a weekly slot, and that
Yeah.
means let's say I want to scrim SMC, and I'm gonna like approach the manager of SMC and say, hey, we want to book a weekly on Monday, 6 to 8. Yeah, sure, we can do that. And that means every Monday on 6 to 8, I scrim SMC.
Yeah.
Of course, depending on your needs, you can keep some of the blocks free for flexibility, or you can change up the weeklies if you end up having to play against SMC and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's not as rigid, but it's just, some like quality of life decisions
Yeah.
in that region in particular that make your life a bit easier and like kind of show that people put way more thought into it and more passion.
Mm.
Otherwise, like regions like Australia are way more laid back than NA, even because the competition is not very dense compared to NA or EU. You're
Okay.
usually, yeah, there's a lot of like disparity. It's very disproportionate between the top two and kind of the rest of the teams in Australia. So you tend to go to like the bottom, the swamp of Australia, as I might call it. You end up with a complete dumpster fire. So each region has this like the cultural differences and how they handle things and how they like interact on an interpersonal level. The competition that it brings and how that changes the approach and the behavior of the players when going about their own practice and like trying to improve and play for Owl. And that kind of obviously you need to treat it differently. I can't go to a team that is just there to like farm some money or play with friends and treat them the same way as a roster who just wants to get Owl ready.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. And I mean, another kind of point on the different nationalities here is that at the point of recording here, a lot of your players are playing on pretty high ping. Um, so how has scrims been with that in mind?
Well, the people who scrimmed us who might see that know very well how hard it is to like play on ping if you've done it before. But even from just playing against us or seeing some of the footage, you can tell that there's obviously it's not a very pleasant experience to play on
Mm.
nearly 200 ping. I mean, I went through that before with UA, so it's not impossible to do something with it, but you definitely feel with the players as you're watching the blocks and you see someone die pressing an ability, dodging the enemy ability,
Yeah.
but just couldn't do it because of the ping and stuff. Um, with that in mind, I feel like our scrims, yeah, we had decent blocks. I would say it's like 50-50 right now, and that's actually a good sign for us, given that we haven't scrimmed a lot.
Yeah.
It's like 1.5 weeks worth of scrims here. I'm not gonna go into too much details,
Of
but like,
course.
yeah, we had some good blocks against teams that were really like uh, high on the list, and we did very well against them. So I would say, of course, right now we're not a um, league championship team, by no
Mm.
means, and that's not the expectation that I had going into the season, and that's not how coaching works. So the people who just see kind of the preseason results or even how we do in Pro Am, that's like far from what we're going to look like in the mid-season. Obviously, at least that's what we're striving for. You can't go to a team coach for 1 week and expect massive changes in results. Like getting rid of bad habits that people developed in the past is a steady and slow process.
Mm.
It can take literally 2 months to see proper results. So it's kind of like we're playing the long game here. We're playing the game for the long run, and even a lot of the other rosters underwent the same issues. You look at teams like Shock getting a
Yeah.
lot of flack for the league scrim codes, but they didn't do that well against Atlanta when at the same time they're playing on 200 ping. Nobody's talking about that, or people are just making assumptions based on what they see. It's not even that the entire scrims are being leaked. It's like individual maps. So a scrim can have like 6 to 7 maps on average,
Yeah.
and you're seeing two of them, 1 to 2 of them, and you're immediately drawing a conclusion. See what I mean? That's of course, I know it's like casual viewers they don't really care about that. I just want to, for them it's just entertainment. They want
Yeah.
to just talk smack. And I've been there. I've been there. I fully understand the view.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
adds, it definitely adds some spice to the scene. So I'm not fully opposed to it. But I feel like if you definitely want to form like a serious founded opinion, well-founded opinion, then you should think about that logistical stuff that you don't immediately
Mm.
uh, come across looking at the footage, right? You kind of have to like think
Yeah. A
beyond the
little,
surface.
little bit more critical thinking there than just what you see.
Yeah.
And just on the leaked scrim codes here, like I've seen some people in the community, and like the most notable one would be Reinforce, advocating for going beyond leaked scrims and going towards, actual streamed scrims and a proper transparency between the community and the players. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, it kind of depends on what exactly you want to see because I can also point out the leaked scrim with communications from
Mm.
London that caused a lot of, uproar within the community. So when you, obviously people will want to have scrims with communications, and it's not just about what has been said in the London scrim in particular, but just generally speaking, the mindset that people approach the scrims with, it can get a little rough. And I feel like a lot of the people in within the community are really sensitive. So when they so I feel like teams that would stream their scrims are not really wouldn't really feel safe within their own private space to be rough to each other, right? Of course, there's like certain lines that you don't want to cross, right?
Mm.
Um, but people need to understand that like in this kind of environment, people take a lot of pride in their competitive mindset and take a lot of pride in the work they put into the game and their own achievements, and they're fully entitled to that. And because of that, things can get a little. People can be rough to each other in the scrims, and that's completely fine. So for me, I'm not really a fan of saying like stream the scrims on top of actually, leaking your own strategy and like
Yeah.
the way you coach for me personally as well. At the same time though, like for me, is that interesting to see? Because I'm gonna be honest, um, people like don't even watch the matches all the time. They just look at the results. So
Yeah.
for me, would people even watch scrims? Like what's interesting to the audience, to the community to see and stream scrims?
Yeah.
Um, so for me, it's kind of like the equivalent of uh, actors, streaming the behind the scenes as they like make the movie. And I feel like people don't really want to watch that. Or same thing for like football teams streaming their practice.
Yeah. That's fair.
Some teams actually allow you to enter the practice facility as the players are training, and barely any people are joining that. So I personally don't really see the benefit of having stream scrims. Maybe there are arguments that I didn't think about right now but from the top of my head, I think there's no like benefit that outweighs the downsides of doing it, especially for the team itself. Like for me, being part of a team, I just don't see any benefit
Yeah.
from myself or my team.
No, that's fair. That's like it's an understandable, you know, point of view. I'm still working through it personally. I haven't made my mind up either direction yet, but yeah, it's definitely an interesting conversation piece there, I think. But look, if anyone does want to watch you play, they're going to have an opportunity very, very shortly now with the Pro-Am. So you're in a group here with some big hitters and some interesting teams. You got Houston and Toronto joining you from the Overwatch League. And then you got Redbird Esports coming from NA. and Twisted Minds from EU. So you've had the pleasure of having one of the EU teams. How do you feel about that?
Well, I like EU, but as much as I like EU, I don't really like the Farah part of it. So that's what we kind of ended up with. I would have preferred to have Team Pepsi, I'm being honest. Doesn't
Okay.
mean I'm afraid or anything, but our group is already funky. Like you look at the individual rosters that we have with the teams. We have like a brawly team with Redbirds. You have a main tank with Houston, so they will most likely opt for some monkey comps. In the league replay codes, they even tried some Doomfist. You have Toronto with a triple DPS lineup and a triple support lineup. So with them having collusion on the off tank, they could opt for some poke with Anazen, and then you got Twisted Minds in the mix, playing all sorts of comps ranging from Doomfist to J Queen to Ramatra to Diva, and then you need to account for even more heroes. So yeah, I can't really say that I'm pleased to have
Okay.
one more funky team in the mix, but at the same time, it's a challenge, so well, we're not running away from challenges here,
Yeah.
so we're just gonna like take it head on and see how it goes.
Yeah, and in terms then of the five there, um, would you consider Toronto to be favorites? That was sort of where I'm looking at the moment.
It's really hard to tell because obviously we can't scrim them since they're in our group.
Mm.
Um, so for me, if, of course, people are gonna hold them like very highly. I think from casual viewers' perspective and like most of the people in the scene will think that Houston and Toronto are the favorites. And given the history of the players on that team,
Yeah.
it's justified to an extent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we're kind of the underdogs here, um, fighting for to earn our spot and to prove ourselves.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think Toronto definitely has an interesting lineup. Of course, people have doubts about the tank position because everybody expected Rhino to be on the roster, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um, so we kind of need to see what Kalush does with it. If they will put him on main tank heroes, or if they just
Avoid
stick
them.
to yeah stick to off tanks, or maybe one of the the newer heroes. And he has shown to uh, play Doom, I think, at some point in the season, and I feel like they might go for that option just again. You know.
Interesting. So obviously, like you said, you can't scrim within the group. Normally as you would expect. So of the teams that you've kind of gotten to know through scrims there recently in other groups, is there anyone in particular you have your eye on? You think that the general public might not be aware of or might not be considering?
Well, an underrated team definitely, especially if I had to pick from tier two, would be Trick Room.
Okay.
I think Trick Room definitely made a really, really good run, and most of the players there are pretty underrated
Mm.
generally in the scene. So it's definitely impressive what they were able to do and that they were able to qualify, and they're really good opponents to scrim against. I highly recommend anyone to scrim Trick Room.
Interesting.
So if I look at, I don't know if I can call them a dark horse because their group definitely isn't easy, to say the least.
Yeah.
Like here, I'm looking at the group stage, and then a group with Shock, Florida, Vancouver, and Timeless.
Yeah. That's
All of them are really tough opponents. So
yeah, definitely. Definitely.
yeah.
Florida is one I have my eye on. I'm excited to see what Sonic could bring in. Um but
Oh, I'm
yeah,
excited for him as well. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Again, just me here being an EU stan as usual, but um, it's all good. It's all good. Okay, so just as a bit of a thought experiment here, okay, NYXL. Let's imagine, unfortunately, didn't make it into the group or past the group stages. Who do you have to win it all?
Oh, okay, that's an interesting one. Well, I would like for London to win it personally, and I think on this patch they can pull it off.
Okay.
So for me, like the winner of my heart will be London for that one.
Hmm.
I'm gonna be rooting for them. I think another like good competitor would be Atlanta Rain. I
Yeah.
think yeah, Atlanta Rain can pull it off as well. Both are really solid teams in my opinion. especially on the mechanical end for Atlanta. They have really crazy players. Like you watch the POV of Stalker in the league scrims, you know why. It's just that having players like that with a lot of clutch factor can do
Yeah,
so much for you. Even if you don't make the best decisions in the game, you can just turn the fight with people just clicking heads.
yeah, fair. That's fair. Um, okay, so let's talk NYXL here again. Coming into going past the prom, coming into the season, expectations then for this season of the Overwatch League. What did you go into the coaching job with, and where are your expectations now?
Well, my expectations they didn't really change. I built this team with trying to push for playoffs.
Okay.
I definitely think we can be the middle in the middle of the pack, and then whether we are at the top or not depends on like several factors, because I can't predict the future, right? Um, but I feel like it's definitely a reasonable expectation to have for me. I don't want to go into the season and like um, uh, spread some propaganda, like set the bar as to like yeah we will 100% be first place.
Yeah.
Like I'm not that kind of person. I'm more of a calculated mind. But I feel like we can actually push for playoffs
Yeah.
and we can be the dark horse under the right circumstances. People had the really low expectations for teams like London,
That's fair.
even a team like Florida. And even though like Florida in particular is a really good example of a team that struggled at the beginning of the season, they were able to push really far towards the end of it because there's so many factors that go into it, you know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I think my expectations will probably stay the same along the season. For me, I want to push for playoffs and I want to work my ass off to give the players on their roster the redemption arc that they deserve.
Brilliant.
Because the majority of players on our roster didn't really have a good previous owl season, and that's where the majority of concern from the community comes from, which to an extent, is just like justified. It's reasonable
Yeah.
to have these kinds of concerns and worries. Like I fully understand your view, but I think even more because of that, everybody who got another chance to be an owl again only has something to prove for themselves and for their own fans. So that kind of affects their work ethic. I feel
Yeah.
like because we have people who have so much to prove after the previous all season, they will work harder than anyone else in the league. And I'm willing to sacrifice myself to give them that spotlight and to give them the results that I think they deserve.
Excellent. Excellent. Look, Amir, I wish you the absolute best of luck. It's been absolutely great, chatting to you over the last little while. I'm always rooting for EU, so I've just added NYXL to that list. Um, it's just been fantastic to see again, like you said, especially for me, Shockwave. I'm a big fan of the guy. I'm just delighted he's able to get back into the Overwatch League again this year. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. Now, before I let you go, I just got to know, who do you want to see me interview next?
To be honest, I have multiple people on the list. I'll
Okay.
like my favorite one will definitely be the Renegade to see what he has to say since his team made Pro Am as well. So I'm pretty sure he
Yeah,
has some like interesting views to share.
definitely.
Otherwise, Faustus and Paintbrush as my
Okay.
personal like my third choice. Yeah,
Interesting. Okay.
Paintbrush. You might see later why I picked the name.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Okay. Again, Amir, thank you very, very much. I wish you the best of luck coming up in Pro Am and, of course, the entire season. Looking forward to seeing what NYXL can do. So, thank you very, very much for your time, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. It's been a blast. Thanks for having me.